Chelsea have picked up just 9 points from a possible 27 in their last 9 Premier League games, dropping from second place to 6th. Things have gone sour since that 22nd of December fixture against Everton, where they drew 0-0 at Goodison Park. So in today's video, we're going to discuss some issues Chelsea have been having lately, a few changes we saw during the West Ham and Brighton games, how Maresca could look to find solutions now that the transfer window has of course slammed shut weeks ago, and the injury troubles that are starting to pile up at the club. In this time frame, Maresca has made tactical tweaks in an attempt to provide balance, tweaking the fullback's positioning, the forward players' instructions based on the opposition they're playing. However, it's a mixture of these 5 issues that we're going to speak about today that have stopped Chelsea in this poor run, with different games highlighting different issues. For some extra context throughout the video, in the last 9 Premier League games, Chelsea have generated 15.24 XG in their last 9 Premier League games, which is 6th in the league during that time span. They have also conceded 12.6 XG in the last 9 games, which is 11th in the league in that time span. The Blues are averaging 16 shots per game in their last 9 games, which is 4th in the league in this metric. However, there have been 12 shots against Everton in a game, 12 against Fulham, 10 against City, and 8 against Brighton. And 3 of those 4 games have one particular thing in common. So let's get into the first 2 problems, which have been breaking down low blocks and the wing pairing in correlation to shot volume. So the first 2 things we're going to speak about are essentially breaking down low blocks and the wing pairings and how that's affecting Chelsea's play. Because in this last sort of stretch of 11 games, or the 9 Premier League games that we're going to speak about as well, these 2 issues go hand in hand. Because what a lot of people have said is, obviously, breaking down low blocks was a big issue. A 0-0 draw against Everton, struggling to break down Fulham when they were sat in a compact block, and then to the point where we had to drop off. Ipswich, again, once they got their goals, they sat in a compact low block. Teams have realised that they can defend Chelsea in a low block. And the reason for that is because, firstly, of course, Nicholas Jackson through the middle. We spoke about this. Chelsea only averaged 1.64 crosses, which is 17th in the league. 1.64 successful crosses per 90. 17th in the league for completed crosses. They also make 8.8 completed passes into the penalty area, which is 7th in the league, so not as bad. But again, it's these little combination plays that someone like Sancho, that's not an arrow, someone like Sancho wants to make those little combinations inside with those little passes. But when teams are sitting really low and compact and they're really blocking out, stopping Chelsea, crosses into the box aren't a useful tool. So that's one way Chelsea can't really find a way to score goals in that way. And that's when it falls to shot volume, because if your crossing volume is high, but it's not successful because of the players that you have attacking the box, which again is your Palmers, your Jacksons, your Enzos, Chelsea don't have a box crasher centre midfielder to make up for the fact that Jackson isn't an aerial threat. Say this was a Jude Bellingham, for example, you at least have the physicality and the traits of a box crasher to make up for the fact that your striker isn't a primary sort of aerial outlet. But Jackson doesn't do that, and Enzo and Palmer, they don't offer that either. So the crossing becomes more of, can you get one so pinpoint that someone like Cucurella can attack it, which is, again, what we've seen when we're sort of setting up. Let's just put it into this sort of, if we're playing in a diamond, for example, and we see this sort of setup, and it would be someone like Cucurella attacking the back post that actually gets on the end of it and gives Chelsea a goal, which is not a reliable way to consistently score goals. Now, that is one thing in terms of crossing. So like I say, when that isn't a viable route, and that's why Chelsea struggled so much against low blocks, what's your next sort of mechanism to goals? And essentially, it should be, and again, this wouldn't be like this. So I'm just going to switch this round because we know that this wouldn't be, let's just put that as tossing to make it make a little bit more sense. When it isn't down to the cross into the box and that's not working and that's not a route forward, the wing pairing becomes really important, because that's where, because you've got bodies in this sort of central zone and they're trying to pack you out of the middle. They know they want you to cross the ball into the box because they know that they can deal with it, because these guys are not aerial threats. Defenses want that. They want to defend that way against a team like Chelsea, who are built in this way because of their lack of proper centre forward. Jackson offers a lot of things, but that's not one of them against the low block. So naturally, the centre is blocked out, which leaves you with these 2 in isolated areas, okay? In terms of what Sancho and Neto bring to the table, trait-wise, they're good at like Sancho, good at retaining the ball. He's a bit slower on the ball, which is why he can sort of help the team all progress at slower pace, so that everybody attracts up the pitch together and you move as a block rather than in sort of one by one. He's also very good at finding those little neat, intricate angles into the box, like I say, with little combinations, sort of like passes. We saw it for the early in the season where he found Nkunku for that 1-0 goal against Bournemouth. Neto, again, he's got that burst of pace to go down the line, but he's really persistent, wants to put that cross into the box. It's his best thing. These are both creators. That's what they are there to do. With these two in the team, 3 of Chelsea's worst shot performing games have came with this wing pairing of Sancho and Neto. 12 against Fulham. I think it was 12 against, who was it, Everton. That was Sancho and Neto. And then the 8 against Bournemouth with not a single shot on target was when Madueke had to go off early, and it became this wing pairing again. This wing pairing, when you don't have a box threat, doesn't work. These 3 pieces have to fit together, and that's been a massive issue for Chelsea, because when Madueke is in here, yes, there's still been some poor performances. City, which we're going to get onto, that was a bit of a different issue. It wasn't necessarily to do with the compromisation of the front line or how it was made. But when Madueke is in here, what you have there is a little bit more balance in terms of you don't have a box crasher, so you're not going to consistently put balls into the box. Madueke can still do that, but what he does better than any of our other wingers is attack this space himself, get shots off on goal himself, which can then cause moments of chaos for these players to latch onto. And without Madueke, you lose that completely. And with him being out now, Neto and Sancho as a wing pairing does not work. The only time that it could have worked, like I said, is if you then have that box striker. So say when Guiu came on against West Ham, it worked well because you're crossing it into someone like Guiu and you're making those balls into the box for him. And even if he's not the one sort of making something happen from it, he's causing enough chaos, again, like we say, for these players to come inside and attack it. And then it was actually Neto that ends up getting the goal because he follows it in. There's enough chaos caused from Guiu, from Cucurella, from Enzo. I think it was from Nkunku at the time as well. Those players cause that chaos. And then Neto comes in and he scores an easy goal because the chaos is being provided by having somebody a little bit more box threat wary with their movement, with their sort of intensity to attack the ball. So those two sort of issues link together because, like I say, the wing pairing without Noni, you've got it's too creation heavy focused. You haven't got enough directness, you haven't got enough running power in behind, and you haven't got enough shot volume between those two wingers. And if you don't have the shot volume coming from wide, then of course you're going to need it to come from the centre. But if you're getting packed against a low block, like I said, with the issues with it when it was Jackson, and now even more so without Jackson when it's in Nkunku, 17th in the league for successful crosses. That's not how you're going to beat a low block side. So these 3 pieces have to connect. And that's why Tyreek George is probably going to be way more important than people realise in these coming sort of few weeks without Madueke, without Jackson, without Guiu. Because if you're going to persist to play with these 2 down the middle, and again, you can drop him there, you can do whatever you want with this. But if you're going to persist to play with sort of this triangle here, your threat in behind has to come from wide because these players are not going to offer that. And that's all about squad profiling and getting what you can from your group. So those are 2 issues that have cost Chelsea in quite a few games this season. Like I say, to list a few off the top of the head, breaking low blocks, it was Ipswich once they got their goal. It was Everton in that 0-0. And it was even Fulham when they went up. The wing pairing, like I said, 12 shots against Everton, 12 shots against Fulham, and 8 shots against Brighton. Those mixed issues are clearly parts of this sort of configuration that has hurt Chelsea in the last sort of 9 Premier League games or last 11 games over a stretch. Those are 2 of the key issues that have stopped Chelsea from progressing and getting some extra results on the board during this time frame. The third issue is more of a defensive one, and it has got a lot to do with Chelsea's winger being pinned back into the last line with the fullback on that same side, then being able to be manipulated in tandem with that winger. The 2 main games this has happened in now are both the 2 games where Chelsea had less of the ball than their opposition, and it was against Manchester City and Fulham. With how the winger is pinned back into the last line and they don't have the same defensive instincts, not only to step out and stop the offside trap that Chelsea try so hard to do, but also in terms of where they can put pressure on the ball to stop that ball going over the top. As you can see here in that flat back five, there is often not enough pressure on the ball to be able to play this way with a high line. This example shows it perfectly, where Neto is having to track into the space behind on the final line, where Gusto is actually playing as the right back, is having to follow Iwobi and put pressure on the ball. This leads to a huge gap opening up between Tosin and Colwill, and Neto being the one to have to try and recover into that space, who doesn't have the same defensive instincts. The fourth issue we're going to speak about is tempo control, and that largely stems from the inexperience in the side and also a few other factors that sort of spill over from last season. Looking at the momentum chart, if you look up to where Chelsea scored their goal and slightly after, from there it became a chaotic back and forth game where Fulham actually had more of the ball and they managed to control Chelsea rather than the other way around. The same happened against Palace. You can see that first half where Chelsea dominated, got their goal. Palace had a little bit of a chance in the first half with that momentum bar going up a bit there, but then coming back down. But look at the second half, back and forth, and too much chaos in the game for a 1-0 lead. When it does break into these chaotic moments, Chelsea do often have the chance to go 2-0 up, but they fail to take the chance, and then mistakes like this from Cole Palmer can lead to that 1-1 chance, which is 2 points dropped. And exactly the same here with Bournemouth, where Chelsea largely had that first half in complete control, 1-0 up, and then the second half breaks into more of a chaotic game state until Chelsea recover it towards the end of the back end of the game and actually end up saving a point rather than losing two. There seems to be a divide with certain players that are willing to slow the game down and they want to control the tempo, but then others that want to go really fast and they want to take every opportunity to break and try and score that second goal, which then actually leaves a bigger gap between the two parties. So as we said, that's a little bit of a mixture of the inexperience in the team, but also the fact that Poch used to push the pace last season and a few things sort of trickling over into this season with some of the younger players. So the last section of this video and the fifth and final point we're going to talk about is basically just the squad building, which I think everybody unanimously agrees with in terms of sort of the profiles that have been put into this squad, how none of them really complement each other. There's a few that work together, of course, where someone like Jackson and Palmer, they've formed a good connection last season and it's sort of helped us this season as well. But pieces that fit together in a puzzle, and it's left Chelsea short-handed. This on screen is essentially the depth chart from the end of January, where Chelsea obviously sent quite a few players out on loan or left the club. And this is the state it's left in when you take away the injuries within the team, such as Madueke, Jackson, Guiu at the moment. Look at how lightweight the top end of the pitch is. And then also look at how those parts at the top end of the pitch fit together when we were talking earlier about wing pairings, box threat and things like this. Not only that, but it's not just about the profiles and how they complement each other. It's also the physical profiling of the team. A lot of physical profiling with the likes of Fofana, who's out, Madueke, who's an athlete. You've lost quite a lot of athleticism in that team, and now it's looking even weaker than it already did, which was never really a strong point for this side anyway. So as we said at the start of the video, each game has had different issues. The Everton game, which isn't on the screen right now, that was tough to break down a low block. Fulham had a few different issues within it. Ipswich had the low block issue as well. Palace was the tempo control. Forget Morecambe. Bournemouth, again, tempo control. Wolves was a good win. City had its own issues with the defensive sort of liabilities. West Ham, again, got a win, but the performance wasn't brilliant. But then those two Brighton performances really highlighted pretty much all of those issues, as stated in this video. Maresca has clearly tried to make tweaks and make things work within this team. That's not to say he's completely blameless and that he couldn't have done more in terms of substitutions at certain times this season, but he's done a lot right. And in my next video, we are actually going to speak about all of your guys' suggestions for the team, and I'm going to break them down to show the tactical flaws that would be left in pretty much any 11 that Maresca chose right now.